Not just another DW, but another acrylic kit. If you didn't catch the video before this one, I opened up that cheap acrylic kit, but this one comes in at about $1,000 more. And this kit was provided to me by zZounds, so if you're interested in checking it out for yourself, you can follow the links in the description. And outside of fulfilling my quest of playing every single type of drum set in existence, I wanted to see what this $1,000 difference gets you in terms of quality, as well as take a deeper dive into the world of acrylic shells and see how much different they are than wooden shells. First up, we got the drum heads. I'm kidding, I'm not that dumb. So interestingly, they went for clear heads for both the batter and rezo. I was expecting this type of head. After all, this is a clear drum set, so you gotta have clear heads. And already I can tell that this drum set was packed a lot better than this one. Shout out to Fernando and Joseph. They know how to package some drums. It looks like we got the bass drum and the hoops. A little disappointed. It would be nice if these were acrylic hoops. There's one point to the cheap kit. Instead of black, we get white bass drum muffling. Whoa, they really care about the bearing edges. This is impossible to film, you see right through it. Bonus points for them to put this thing on the bearing edge so it doesn't get all dinged up. Let me put this back on before I ding them up. Box number 2, there is a hole down here where it looks like the leg bracket poked through. So I'm gonna guess that this is the floor tom. Spare parts. We'll have to see what's inside of here. All right, so we do have the floor tom, but also I think this is the 10-inch. This is 10x8 and everything comes pre-installed. Also, I should mention this is a design series, so the lugs are a little bit different and a little bit smaller than what comes on a collector's, which I really don't mind. I think the smaller lugs look better on the acrylic shell, and also with the collector's lugs, this thing would weigh like 1,000 times more. One thing you hear about acrylic shells are that they're heavy. With all the hardware on the drum, the 10-inch weighs 7 pounds and we'll say 5 ounces. And then the wooden shell, which by the way has bigger lugs, weighs the exact same. Which means that the acrylic shell is probably heavier, but to be safe, just the acrylic shell is 2 pounds, 2 ounces. And the wooden shell with a wrap on it is 1 pound, 14 ounces, basically 15 ounces, only a little bit lighter than the acrylic. I was about to say these hoops were wedged on pretty good, but they're actually secured down with a tension rod. This is a 16 by 14 inch floor tom, and I should mention that the bass drum is 22 by 18. And just like the bass drum, we have this nice bearing edge protector, so let's take this off and take a closer look at them. These bearing edges are cut a million times better than that kit. Looks like a 45-degree inside cut with a very, very small round over on the outside. Also worth mentioning, this shell is about 3/16 of an inch thick, while the Donner kit is closer to about 1/4 inch. Before we dive in the final box, let's check out this spare parts box. I don't know if I'll call these spare parts, but we have bass drum claws, bass drum tension rods, I'm gonna guess floor tom tension rods in here. Then in here, you can learn about the drum set you just bought. Drum key comes in handy sometimes. These tension rods are probably actually spares. And then just a bunch of memory locks, which are a very different design than the ones that came on my collector's kit. Okay, who designed this? Slightly inconveniencing me having to loosen this a little bit more. Alright, back to this box though. Floor tom legs. These things are very heavy. A little shameless self-promotion of your sister company, the 12-inch. This is a 12 by 9 rack tom, and I should mention that these shells are seamless just like the other kit. And if you know me and my preferences and sizes, then you know that I'm not a huge fan of 12 by 9s. And now back to this box, we got the snare. I think it's 14 by 5.5. Yep, that's a snare. It has 10 lugs, the DW mag throw off, and then just a regular butt plate. And a not clear head. There's one upside to clear drums. You don't need a foot cam. But we all know wooden drums and we sort of know acrylic drums, but what really is the difference in sound? Oh gosh. Oh, isn't that lovely? And now if you thought that was ugly, take a look at this. Shout out to Luke's Drum Loot on Instagram. He basically gave me this snare. This is an old Pearl free floater, which means that the shell isn't attached to any of the lugs. The shell just free floats there, which means we can swap out the shell with this acrylic one pretty easy and see how it sounds, and make it uglier at the same time. Well, something seemed a little bit off after I watched that footage, and it turns out that this shell is like a 1/4 inch taller than the wooden shell. Also, I thought I could rely on this old Tama tension watch to duplicate the tuning, so I tuned this shell to the same numbers, but it sounded a little bit high in pitch, and also it felt a little bit high in tension, so I ended up having to rely on my ear to tune it closer to the original tuning, and if it means anything, I think that tuning sounded better than how I had it. To be fair though, I couldn't tune the wooden shell that high without it being super ringy. 10 by 8 DW Collector's Maple VLT shell. Someone with perfect pitch, tell us if that was actually a C. 10 by 9 acrylic shell. I'm like scared to touch this thing. While we have the naked shell, let's talk a little bit about durability. Look at that, I put it back together. Okay, not really, this was a different shell, which also just so happened to be a DW. I was kind of surprised at how hard it was to break this thing, but to be fair, there was a chunk missing like this big out of it, so the whole shell was able to flex and act like a spring. But a solid shell can only flex so much before it can't flex anymore and breaks. Which is why this kind of stuff and this kind of stuff happens to acrylic shells. And on top of shells imploding, another thing that people worry about with acrylic shells are scratches. Pointy sharp knife versus acrylic. Some random pieces of wrap. With clear finishes, depending on if it just goes through the top coat or through the top coat and stain or paint, they can be pretty noticeable. From a distance you can't really tell with the wraps, but in the right lighting and really zoomed in you can kind of tell. But with acrylic shells they are pretty noticeable, especially that one. And this piece of wrap I actually used to make a bass drum hoop protector for the kit, because this kit didn't come with one. My collectors did, and that thing probably cost them like 4 cents to make. Also, the collectors came with this nice rag, and this one didn't, even though smudges are probably more of an issue with this kit. Tension rods, here we go again. Thankfully, the threads aren't as fine as the ones that came on the collectors. I honestly still don't understand those things. They aren't a regular 1224 rod like you find on every other drum set. They're a finer thread, but an acceptable amount of thread, and nowhere near the amount of threads that came on that collectors. It takes like 5 minutes to screw in one tension rod on that kit. But this kit is built really nice and the edges are super clean, and also I really do like these little screw brackets. If I had to guess, they help prevent this from happening, which you do see on a lot of acrylic screw holes.